Join our knowledgeable hosts as they dive into the captivating universe of comic books, movies, TV shows, and pop culture. Get ready for vibrant discussions and a shared enthusiasm for all things superhero and beyond. A comic podcast straight from the panels. This is Beyond the Capes.
All right, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Beyond the Cape podcast. With us today is Josh and Gideon. We are here to talk about the Christmas miracle that's come out, Marley's Ghost. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, you so much. Yeah, happy to be here.
We're happy to have you back, Josh. Welcome back. We talked about last time we had Pinocchio. Great book. That was always a fun interview.
Yeah, that was a great conversation.
Yeah. We're happy to have you back. Gideon, welcome for first time to the show.
Thank you so much.
So everyone gets a little kind of pre-information. Where do you fall in the illustrated world comic collaboration that we are all big fans of?
Well, I was a comic fan when I was a little kid, and then I took like 25 years off and followed other artistic pursuits, found my way back to comics. As part of my midlife crisis, and
Perfect.
I've been happy ever since. A lot of great things have happened for me once I found my way back to comics. Not least of which is getting to make Marley's Ghost, which was actually my first graphic novel. It was a scary way to enter the business, but a great way to do it. Getting to work with Josh and getting to work with Harvey Kurtzman, of course. So yeah, I mean, I was like I said, I was a big Marvel and Mad fan when I was a kid. Also, my parents had all the like underground comics around, and so I love that stuff. And then just kind of lost my way for a while. But like I said, was happy to find my way back while I still had time to make some books.
Perfect. You picked a good time to come back into the insanity. That is the comic book world. Which brings us to the whole point why we're here. Harvey Kurtzman, Marley's Ghost. Now, from the preview and this hearing a little bit about the story, this adaptation to be made into a graphic novel by Harvey Kurtzman has been into the works for some time would be almost an understatement.
Yeah, I would say 75 years almost.
Yeah. Why now? I mean, obviously I think it's a great idea. And I'm happy to see it. I think for some people that find it hard to read a classic Christmas Carol, it is a lot to interpret and take. I think a graphic novel is a great format, especially for kids and younger readers. But what's prompted you to say, you know what, it's time we finally, help Harvey out and we finally get this project finished?
Well, we weren't really the brains behind the operation. I mean, it was Kurtzman's idea back in the 50s, and then he put it away. And Josh, who actually rediscovered Kurtzman's original drawings? Was that Dennis and John?
Yeah, I don't know if Dennis rediscovered them as much as they're just part of his archives. And Dennis Kitchen sort of represents the Kurtzman estate and works with Adele Kurtzman and sells art for the Kurtzmans. And so I think this was just something, Dennis has written a lot about Kurtzman, done a lot of scholarship and history. And it was always just this sort of great lost project, partially because Kurtzman had really been self-consciously trying to create the idea of a graphic novel. He really wanted it to be a book, not a stapled comic. He wanted it to come out from like a publisher like Simon & Schuster or Random House. Yeah. And he wanted it to be this great literary adaptation. And frankly, he just couldn't sell it, at least not to any of the companies that he wanted to sell it to. He made this amazing pitch where he drew a handful of these incredibly beautiful finished pages and a handful of chapters of very rough like layouts, and some script pages and some sample art and a sort of breakdown of what the project was. And he sent it out to all these publishers, but it really wasn't a thing. Comics did not exist in book format, at least not ones that weren't aimed at little kids. so it was just sort of unknown in the publishing world, and it was too far ahead of its time. So he didn't find a taker for it, and then I guess just kind of abandoned the project over time. And so I think this was something that Dennis and the Kurtzman estate had been thinking about for quite a while. Like, what if there was something interesting to do with that material? Maybe to finish the project, maybe to publish it as an art book that included other material. So I think that had been a thing that had been banging around as an idea between them for a long time, with Dennis and his partner John Lind and Adele at the Kurtzman estate. And then they started talking to Chip Mosher at Comixology, who was doing Comixology originals and commissioning all this great material from various publishers and various creators. And so they kind of brought us on board to sort of do the work on the ground of like finishing this project. So it was really their concept, and we were kind of brought in once the idea was there. But it was such a privilege and such an exciting adventure to be able to do it.
Definitely. Now, how does it feel since both of you guys contributed to the writing and to the artwork? I'm assuming he had a good chunk of this kind of started, maybe not finished, but a good chunk kind of underway of what he wanted the story to be and do. Was it more of just working off of that original idea for both of you, or kind of taking what he did and maybe fine tuning it? Since obviously technology has come a long way since then, different media. I mean, a lot of things could be altered a little bit just to kind of shape it up. How did that process go for you guys?
Well, he had like about 15, maybe 20 pages at the most that he had brought up to the level of being colored and lettered in the way that he wanted to make the book.
That, isn't it?
It might have been only like 12 or so.
Yeah, I think it was like even 10.
But it's Kurtzman's work. It looks like Kurtzman art. Yeah. And I do not work that way. Kurtzman was such a great less is more person and understood how to distill things down to their essentials. And I'm kind of the opposite. I love detail and rendering and all that kind of stuff. I wish I could be as succinct and clear as Kurtzman, but I'm not. Anyway, so he did those pages. And then, like Josh said, there's another maybe 15 or 20 pages where he just has them laid out, and you can kind of see him losing interest or losing enthusiasm, probably as the publishers were rejecting him, And so it was kind of like, for me, it was kind of like having training wheels. I think, Josh, you were the one who actually came up with that metaphor for it, where it's like, okay, we've got this great start, and Kurtzman established the kind of storytelling he wanted to do, but then it kind of gradually peters out. So I was able to use that. I mean, the hardest part actually was those first 15 or so pages where I wanted to follow Kurtzman's layouts as closely as possible, but at the same time translate them into my style, so that the book wouldn't have like this jarring moment where, we wanted the book to be cohesive. It was helpful that at some point when Kurtzman was trying to do this project, he had commissioned Jack Davis to do a sample page. I think he thought that it might be easier to find a publisher if Jack Davis was going to be the artist, whose, I guess, style he thought would be more accessible or commercial. And that was a great sort of way in for me because, like I said, I grew up just loving Mad Magazine, and especially the work of Davis and Drucker. And so having that sample page that Jack Davis did was a great way for me to be like, okay, I can't work like Kurtzman, but I can at least try to work like Davis. And so I used that page as my way into the project. And then as the Kurtzman pages ran out, then it was like we were, once that the ball was rolling, and then it became more like just me and Josh and Shannon, just immersing ourselves in the Dickens text, and also watching every different movie and TV version of the show that we could find, getting inspiration, and also for me, finding reference materials, which was something that I really needed.
Yeah.
I'd never drawn a Victorian top hat or what's the name of those coats, Josh? The
Inverness coat. I think we
Inverness
learned.
coat. Yeah, I didn't even know what an Inverness coat was.
All right. Well, now you know everything about the Victorian era. You're well acquainted.
Gideon, especially, is an expert in Victorian fashions at this point.
Perfect. The new subgenre of specialty. Josh, for writing for you, was this any more challenging just because there is a conceived notion behind what the Christmas Carol is? Just because some people, I grew up watching the Muppets Christmas Carol. That's
one of my favorites.
Yeah, that's one of my favorites, and I
I'm
think
gonna
they
watch
do.
that this weekend.
Yeah, you're gonna love it. It's fantastic, and I think they do a decent job of really hitting the literary tale in that movie. Surprisingly, would that make hard writing this any more difficult? Just because we've seen different things or we've read different versions of the book, and we are expecting different parts of the story.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things that was hardest about it was just wanting to do right by all the people. I mean, by Charles Dickens and by Harvey Kurtzman and by Harvey Kurtzman's family, and wanting to nail this thing and create something that all of we can't actually get feedback from any of these people because none of them are here anymore. But you want to make something that you think they could be proud of and they would be pleased by. And those are some big shoes to step into, obviously. Like, one of the greatest cartoonists ever to live, and Charles Dickens is one of the greatest writers ever to live. So it's a lot, but ultimately you just have to, you can't be too precious with it. And that's kind of what we learned along the way. I think one of the things Shannon, who was sort of our third collaborator, was really valuable with was just saying, look, like, cut text. Like, you just need less text than this. But it's hard to cut Dickens text because his writing is so beautiful and vivid, and there's like these phrases. You're like, I can't cut this phrase. Like, that's such a fantastic phrase. But you sort of have to, like, because ultimately the dictates of the project are whatever is going to make the project work, not just making sure you squeeze in all the things that you love.
Yeah, and the version, the pages that Kurtzman had, and again, like, not in any way like a criticism of him, because he was doing something totally new, right? He was trying to adapt a great novel into comics, and that hadn't hardly, I don't know, had that ever been done well or completely before then? Probably not. So he was in new territory, and in the pages that he drew, he included a ton of text. And because we were making a book that we wanted to feel readable to a modern person who's used to reading graphic novels, we knew we had to reduce the text. And we kind of at least told ourselves that Kurtzman would have come to the same conclusion eventually anyway, so we just told ourselves that and went along with that for how we approached it. Well, like Josh said, it was a constant balancing act because the original text is so great. It's so there were certain lines that I guess you could say that we did not cross, where we were like, that line has to be in there because it's just so tasty. So we kept those ones, or as many of them as we could.
Well, we're all looking forward to that, which brings us obviously why we're here. Marley's Ghost, which that was always another controversy with most people that read it, was Ebenezer haunted by 3 ghosts or 4 ghosts. I will always say 4 ghosts, because how can you not count Jacob Marley as a ghost that visited him?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
So with this story, where do we see the difference where this might be something new and exciting for the most experienced reader or watcher of A Christmas Carol? That might give them maybe a little bit more new insight with this story specifically.
So I have sort of a theory that the reason he called it Marley's Ghost is that part of what he was really drawn to about this story was the haunted, sort of spooky aspect of it. I mean, there's a great tradition of Victorian Christmas ghost stories,
which I did not know.
Yeah, I sort of learned about that through this project, and it's a really cool and interesting tradition. And A Christmas Carol was in line with it's a part of that tradition. So there's this sort of tradition of people sitting around the fire on Christmas Eve, telling ghost stories like late into the night, which I love because Christmas. There's something a little spooky about Christmas. It's like it's the solstice. It's like the darkest night of the year.
Yeah.
You're sort of there and warm with your family, but it's dark and cold outside. It's like it was a sort of dark and stormy night kind of energy. And I think, at least judging from the fact that he had titled it Marley's Ghost and the way he had executed those first handful of pages, he was really interested in the haunting aspect of it. Because those initial pages, they're very funny. And they're very like vivid and Kurtzman cartoonish in like the greatest possible sense, but they are genuinely spooky. Like you feel the darkness of this of Scrooge's quiet, empty house as he's like rambling around and hearing these noises, and Marley's ghost shows up. So that's something we tried to highlight throughout the book, was like sort of restoring some of the spookiness of A Christmas Carol, which I think is in the original very present. It's very spooky throughout, and kind of, especially as you get to the end with the third ghost, it gets pretty nightmarish in a lot of ways. But sometimes you lose some of that in some of the adaptations, which focus on the sort of.
I think that in some of the adaptations, probably because they were trying to make sure that it was palatable to little kids, they kind of soft pedal the fear and that part of the story, and that kind of subverts the story, because for the story to really work, you have to really believe that in the course of one night, this guy who's an absolute jerk transforms.
Yeah, totally.
Right? He's got to go on this complete journey. He has to really get slapped around.
Yeah.
And you see that in a lot of the different film versions. It's the part of the story that changes the most in the different film versions. And I think I came to think that was because they're all grappling with a way to make his transformation more believable. So for us, we tried to make Stave 4, which is Christmas Future, as genuinely scary as possible. So we stripped it of all the color that's in the rest of the book, and the whole chapter is just in black and red. And I went for inspiration to like a lot of the darkest and most like stark art that I could find. I tried to, I mean, it's still packed with a lot of detail, but I tried to push myself to use darker shadows and make things feel a little bit more primitive and a little bit more exaggerated, to do what I could to make that section genuinely terrifying, which I think we felt we needed to do if we were going to believe that Scrooge was really transformed.
Definitely.
Did that so beautifully. And I think it's just like really vital. I think it is I think that's something that gets lost, is the nightmarishness, and also like the darkness of the story and the sense of all the poverty that it shows is really important to the story that Dickens was telling. And that's something that Dickens was interested in a lot of his books. I mean, he really like portrayed the brutality of poverty and exploitation pretty regularly. And, you know, I think in a lot of the adaptations, you lose some of that, and they make the sort of impoverished Londoners like much more into stock character types, the sort of, you know, the panhandler, the chimney sweep, like I think it's really important to the story to keep all that stuff in there. It's like it's really at the core of what the story's about.
Yeah, I went and looked at for the visual inspiration for that chapter. I looked at Doré's engravings of the poor people of London at that time. And I also looked, I mean, her work is a little later, but I looked at the work of Kata Kollwitz, the German artist from the early 20th century. You know, again, she was slightly later time, but her work was all about the grinding poverty of the working class. And I tried to evoke some of the imagery for both of those artists in the work.
Definitely. No, and I mean, I think both of this is a great description, because I've always wondered, even while reading it, number one, the second ghost, the ghost of Christmas Present, he's literally dying. I mean, he dies at the end of seeing him, because the present can't stay forever. It comes back every day. And I know in like the books and the movie, it's always a big giant guy eating a hearty feast and is just enjoying the time, but he's enjoying the time because he knows he's dying.
Oh, that's interesting. That's interesting. I don't think we included that. We should have included that. That would have definitely helped make it creepier. Wow. We missed an opportunity there. We kind of just leaned into him being this big, gross, kind of disturbingly lecherous guy, which was fun.
Yes.
Also, I think that will also work as well. But I think the biggest one, and a lot of people, and it sounds like this will be addressed too in the book, is I think Marley's ghost had the biggest impact on Scrooge, because he idolized this man. I think in one point in like the old text, like he was kind of happy that Marley died, because now he finally inherited all the business holdings. Now he's the rich one, and he's, you know, he gets to live life, and he's tired of his, you know, Marley's tutelage. He's done. He's glad he's dead, and he sees like it's not going to end well for me. And I feel like they just really, a lot of the adaptations just kind of blow past that. He kind of sees that it's over for him unless something drastically happens.
That's even a little bit missing in the original Dickens text. Like, that's I think partially there's just some things, and again, I feel like I'm like criticizing Kurtzman and Dickens here, and I'm gonna get, you know, I'm gonna be punished eternally for this. But if there's anything that is lacking in the original book, it is that there are some loose ends, and you kind of wonder, like, Marley shows up, and Marley's such an interesting character, and their relationship is so important, but then he never shows up again in the story. And when Josh and I were deeply immersed in this, we were kind of toying with the idea of bringing him back in the end. We didn't, because we didn't want to stray from the original, because we didn't think Kurtzman would have wanted that, but it was very tempting. We did put him back in on the last page. Like, the book ends with a splash page of all the ghosts looking down on Scrooge, being a nicer guy. So we put him up there in the sky looking down, because it did seem like he needed to come back. Like, their relationship, there's a lot that could be explored there for sure. And I think that in a couple of the movies, they tried to do that a little bit. Josh and I even had this extra little bit that we were thinking of adding in if we ever did get a chance to do like another 10 or 20 pages of bonus material that explored that a little bit. Like
a deleted scene.
They don't ever show, like, why would Scrooge go through the trouble to come back and haunt him?
Yeah.
Like, just because he loves Scrooge, or does he really feel guilty about something? So we thought, wouldn't it be cool to put in the scene where you actually see him leading Scrooge astray?
Definitely.
You know?
I mean, I'd be all for that, even if they somehow got like a side story book of like the ghost of Marley, and just like a little bit of what his business dealings and what he was doing in the afterlife after like atoning.
Yeah. Maybe we'll make a mini comic for Christmas next year.
That would be awesome. Now, with the story, obviously we know the ending. The goal is a haunting to teach Scrooge a lesson, obviously to make him a better man as he's visited by these. Was it a little difficult writing and drawing, knowing that like here we're bringing back that really spooky haunting, that Victorian haunting, which a lot of us can, even horror movies of like old, like Haunting of Connecticut, like all these 1800 haunting movies, but knowing that I now got to wrap it up, and I kind of got to make it like, no big deal though. Look at him. He's cheery. He's jumping around on Christmas Day. Everything worked out.
Right.
I mean, I think the more you underline the horror, the more the bigger the release is in ways. So no, I don't. I think that gear shift. I think some of the adaptations do like shy away from that because they want to have the big happy ending. But to me, it's like the nightmare that he goes through that kind of justifies the happy ending. That's what allows it to be such a total transformation.
Also, he's still kind of a jerk. Like he goes through this transformation and suddenly he's generous and all that, but he still fucks with Cratchit on when he goes back into the office.
Yes.
And he like he totally fucks with him.
He's like,
it's
so great mean. For a prank.
It's so mean what he does.
It's totally
the change can't happen overnight. He's willing to, just let's dip our toes into the pool. Let's not jump in.
He might suddenly have learned the error of his ways, but he still has an edge.
Yeah, totally.
Definitely.
But I think of it sometimes in relation to It's a Wonderful Life, which is another, obviously one of the most famous Christmas stories. And I feel like because they're these like holiday family classics, like they get really sanitized in people's memory. But like they both run on like their fuel is just nightmarish hell. Like that's what they're about. They're about people who have like destroyed themselves. And neither of them flinches at all. Like, It's a Wonderful Life is about a suicidal person, and it's not portrayed in like a cute way. He really leans into that performance. Someone on the verge of suicide. And so, I think a big part of like what makes those stories work so well is the fact that you really have to earn the happy ending. The happy ending is so big and over the top and heartwarming, even though the example that Gideon gives is a good one. That's not so heartwarming. But like that ending is supposed to be such a huge relief and release, and you're supposed to walk out of it feeling so good about it all. But like, if you're afraid to go through, like, it's really hell in both of those stories. If you're afraid to go through that to get there, it kind of doesn't allow you to get where the story wants to go. So I feel like I feel like Kurtzman was really into that aspect of it. And it's something we tried to lean into.
Definitely. Now, obviously, you guys have done a lot of research to make this happen and really seeing the different variations. At any point in your research, did you ever think, like, man, could this story have changed if we just, or Dickens even said, like, you know what, at the end of the story, Scrooge isn't going to change, or you know what, even worse, he's going to be so scared from all these ghosts that he just dies on the spot.
Well, that's the difference between real life and storytelling, right? In every story that we love, people go through a transformation that very rarely happens in real life. Like it's the difference between 90% of the movies out there and Coen Brothers movies. Like Coen Brothers movies are the only movies where nobody ever changes and everything is meaningless. And that's what's so great about Coen Brothers movies. They're the only people I know of who regularly pull that off.
If a Bertolt Brecht version of A Christmas Carol, like absolutely it would be about how he doesn't change and then dies sad and alone.
Or the proletariat actually comes to his house and just stabs him and all start living in his house.
Yes, exactly.
All right, perfect. Whoever's listening, that remake's coming in 2025.
I would watch a Christmas Carol in a heartbeat.
I'd give it a go. It sounds like it'd be fun.
Well, we did have another idea that we had was to do a sequel. Josh and I were talking about doing a sequel where Scrooge goes like too far off the other end and basically starts letting all kinds of ne'er-do-wells just live in his house. And he kind of turns into like this total like Pollyanna hippie type who just has no structure to his life at all. And then Marley has to come back again and be like, listen, dude, rein it in just a little bit. Okay. Like we're still capitalists. Okay.
Definitely. I'd read The Cult of Scrooge.
Yes.
It's got solid bases.
Again, another comic that we'll have to make.
All right. Perfect. Plenty of ideas. Now, in your guys' writing and drawing this, everyone usually has a part of a story where maybe they didn't think it would be as hard to get through this certain part. For me, the hardest part of this story is always the ghost of Christmas past. It's obviously critical because it goes into the backstory of how did we kind of get to this point in his life. It's just so kind of humdrum with him, and so almost obvious too, because obviously he's not a well-adjusted person. I mean, obviously that's how he got here. I knew that as soon as Marley's ghost came. So it for me, it always felt like, did I really need this? No. That's kind of my least favorite part of the story. Did you guys have a part of the story where you're like, I'm still happy to do the research and do this, but I'm looking more forward to the Ghost of Christmas future, or I'm more excited for a certain other part?
That was the hardest part for a couple reasons. One, it is kind of like just this. Well, the ghost, that ghost is the least interesting ghost too. She's kind of like a tour guide. That's all. She doesn't have a personality. Dickens didn't really give her or it a personality. The way that he did for Christmas Present, and then the Ghost of Future is just so mysterious and terrifying. So yeah, it's kind of like just a tour guide, and it is also the part of the story where you're just being shown all this stuff and nothing really funny or adventurous happens. That's also the part of the story where Kurtzman kind of stopped drawing the story. And Josh and I also kind of felt like, in addition to not finding a publisher, he probably got a little bored. After between Marley and then when things get really good again, and if you want to tell a ghost story, things don't get good again for another 50 or 60 pages. So yeah, that was the tough part for me. I mean, I don't know, Josh, how was it for you?
No, same. I mean, I think that is the trickiest part of the story because it is vital to the story. Yeah. It has the least. I mean, it's where you gain some sympathy for Scrooge. You come to understand him as a character, and so it can't function. It's really important. Like you have to nail that part, or the rest of the story doesn't work. But it does give you like the least exciting visual material to work with, and. I mean, after like the thrill of Marley showing up, who's like such a great character, and just the first haunting is so like intense and exciting. And then you're like, okay, like buckle in. This is going to be. I also always feel like, I mean, everybody knows A Christmas Carol, so like everybody who reads it is already going to know what the plot is. But if they didn't, like in books or films or whatever, wherever they tell you there's going to be X number of things, and then you have to do the first one, it's like, geez, I know there's like 3 of these things, and we're still in the first one. So I always think like, okay, like you're really setting up readers to like get bored when you like give them enough.
That's a good point. Yeah. Although I will say the two things that I never want to have to draw again are Marley's chains and Scrooge's nightgown. Like, and top hats in general. Like if I never have to draw another top hat, because they're really hard to draw.
Coats, you want to draw.
The brim does something really weird. It's so hard to get it right. Like it curves up, but just a little.
Right.
Yeah. I'm done. I'm done with that. Even 6 years on, like I hope I'm okay.
Still have PTSD.
If we do a sequel, we're just going to put them in some other kind of hat for no apparent reason.
Yes. Just like they're all wearing like Oakland A's hats.
Perfect. Chains, Marley will be wrapped in I don't know, something else.
Yeah.
something easy. Just a little ribbon tied perfectly.
Gideon actually had a nightgown made so his friend could model it as Scrooge for reference shots.
That was the smartest decision I made working on this book. Yeah. It was a bit of an expense up front, but it made it a lot easier because I knew I was going to have to draw Scrooge. Like Scrooge gets put through the ringer. He's crawling around on the floor. He's flying through the air, all this stuff. So yeah, it was great. I hired a seamstress to make a Victorian nightgown. They're hard to find, especially for guys who are 6'3". My friend who modeled for me was 6'3". So Yeah, I still have the nightgown, and I also have about 1,000 really embarrassing photos of my friend prancing around in this room wearing that nightgown. So,
So your Christmas cards are set.
yeah. And anytime I need anything, I can just, I'm sure I can get it from him, because he'll be like, if you don't, I'm going to publish all these pictures,
I'd hate that to make a behind the photo book, but I will.
Yeah,
that
exactly.
would be fantastic. Yeah, you're not the first person to say chains. A lot of the artists we've had here, chains, rope, and I was always told any number of brick walls over and over and over that require intricate brick walls. They just want to do flat concrete. Every building's just going to be flat concrete.
Well, then you're missing out, though. Like a brick wall, if you just have a little bit of it, you throw 80% of it into solid shadow, and then you just show enough of the bricks in perspective so the reader understands where they are in the room. Sorry, I'm getting a little nerdy there, but
that's all right. Hey,
it's hard to do that with a chain.
Yeah, true.
Hey, we're all here for that.
Chains are the worst.
Chain sounds absolutely terrible. Now, having done this project, and obviously Kurtzman's not around, unfortunately, to see that, his story finally is getting published. It is out there. How do you think he would react? I mean, almost react not only to his book getting made, but seeing like what he started. That was this like, who would do this? Like, who wants to see like a classic, take on a book with illustrations? What crazy group of people would ever pick this up? And here we are now, where everyone's just like, oh, I love graphic interpretations.
Man, it scares me to think of what he would think, because he was a god, and I love that I got to make this book. It was a thrill and a great way for me to, it was my first paid gig in comics. So I'm very happy to have done it, but I tried not to think too much about what he would think.
Yeah.
I mean, Kurtzman was just such an immaculate craftsman, and he cared so much about his own work and the work of his collaborators. And I'm sure he would have taken issue with some decisions we made. I don't know which ones. We did our best to make something that we think he would have been proud of, but there's really no way to know. And all I know is that we took every lesson from him we possibly could, not just from the pages that he drew and the materials for this project, but just like the storytelling lessons you learn from Harvey Kurtzman, who, there was just nobody ever better at telling a story and at making a comic come to life and at creating something totally vivid and alive.
It taught me a lot. I'd seen his work, but I'd never spent as much time with it. And then it was also like, wow, here's a bunch of pages, like so much of his work you've seen since you were a little kid, and you sort of take it for granted. And then suddenly it was like, no, here's new stuff, like stuff that was buried in a drawer. And I'm looking at it and I'm like, okay, well, this is actually something I have to deal with and absorb and elaborate on and move forward from. And it really taught me a lot. Like for me, I teach drawing, and I teach drawing to cartooning majors, and I'm always trying to figure out how to get them to understand what it takes to make a character into an actor. You know, what you have to do to turn a character into an actor. Like, what is it about a body that expresses feeling? And Kurtzman understood that as well as anyone. And he was able to do it in this very reduced language that very few people can. So for me, it was very educational and terrifying.
Yeah, I think that specifically is true of both Kurtzman and Dickens. They were both like masters of gesture, of like defining a character so thoroughly that you completely understand them and they exist on the page and in your imagination. With just a single line, a single stroke of the pen, like you get so much with so little. And there's so much vividness that comes across like so quickly from both of those authors. So I think that was something it's very hard to live up to. But it's something we were very focused on. I think when we were trying to figure out how to do this was just like how to get that kind of vividness across, where you feel every. I really feel like in Kurtzman comics and in Dickens books, like everything communicates so cleanly and so. I mean, I'm using the word vivid like 12 times, but I think it's the right word for it.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, that's something we thought about a lot.
Absolutely. Yeah.
No, definitely. I think from all the images that I've seen of the book, I mean, I think everyone would be proud. I think even they would be happy to see everything looks immaculate. Which brings us to the kind of the end of this. Obviously, this is a great collection, especially if you are a big fan of classic literature, of A Christmas Carol. I would say this is probably going to be something you'd want in your collection. For everyone listening, I know we were talking a little bit about this off show. We can get this at our local LCS currently, correct?
Absolutely. Yeah. It's been a comic book store's got it like a week or two ago. So yeah, your local comic shop should definitely have it. And if they don't, you should pound on the table and demand that they get you a copy for sure.
Yes.
Maybe wear your shackles and just kind of clang them
Yes,
around.
haunt them at night yes.
Yeah. Yeah, just don't, you didn't hear it from this show, but if you can do that, give them the Scrooge treatment.
Absolutely.
Now, the other benefit too, and I don't know if this is, I forgot to ask, with this being Comixology, is this also going to be digital with Comixology's library?
I believe it continues to be. I mean, it has been for several years available through Comixology and Amazon. So yeah, I'm sure that it still is. But I don't know. For me, I'm an old man, and if it's not on paper, I'm not entirely sure it exists. So
Yes.
I'm really happy to hold it in my hands, and I think it makes a much better Christmas gift, to open a package and find a nice graphic novel inside than to open a PDF. Nothing wrong with
No, not at all.
Yeah, we originally created this for Comixology back in, I guess, 2018. And so that's when it had first come out as a Comixology original. But it's funny because I think Gideon and I are both such print people. Like, I just love physical books.
Yeah.
And Comixology is an amazing company, and it was a privilege to work for them. And we won Best Digital Comic of the Eisner Awards, which was astonishing, which was what's happening. But I think for both of us, like, it's kind of funny that we won the Eisner for Best Digital Comic because we're both such print people. So we're both so excited. It's like a book that we can hold in our hands now. You can read it in the bathtub if you want.
Definitely no. And I think, Josh, we talked about this when you were last on the show. There's nothing better than the smell and like the feel of fresh pages on a new book, and like that hardbound covers. There's a simple pleasure to it that unfortunately now few people will probably ever know coming up, which is sad, to say the least.
I think there will always be, it might be an ever dwindling number, but there will always be at least some people who want to hold a book in their hands and be able to, not just look at, but touch and hold the thing that they're reading. And, there's the collector mentality. There's the cherished object mentality, which, I mean, Josh's company, Beehive Books, makes like incredible cherishable objects. I have many of them up here as well, and that's important to at least some people.
Yes. I think books are going to make a comeback. I think everybody hates being on their phone now. I think we're all on our phone 24 hours a day, and none of us like it. Right. So I think people are looking for any excuse to not be on their phone. So I think people actually I think people are pretty into books right now. And I think that's already happening to certain extent.
Perfect. Well, thank you guys for coming on. Everyone listening, we will have the links below on the show. Click them, follow them, get this book. You're not going to be disappointed. For everyone listening and they want to keep up with what you guys are doing, see what your next projects are, where's the best place to follow you guys?
Awesome. Thank you. So you can follow me on Instagram at Gideon Kendall. I have a weird name, so it's pretty easy to find me. I also have a YouTube channel I think is also at Gideon Kendall. I don't know how YouTube works, but if you search my name, it'll come up. I post lots of cool educational content there, like drawing educational content. And yeah, you can also, let's see, I have a store online. So that's at gideonkendall.com/store. And I've got this book, which I will send you a signed copy if you want. Probably won't get there before Christmas, but then I've also got lots of my other graphic novels and prints and stuff like that there.
Yeah,
Awesome.
you're on TikTok now too, aren't you?
What's that?
Aren't you on TikTok now too?
I am on TikTok, but that's just because my assistant puts the videos there. I choose not to. I can't. There's another place for things to exist is too much for my ancient brain.
And Josh, what about you? Where can they follow you?
So we do a lot through Beehive Books. Beehive Books is my publishing company. And so you can find us on Instagram at Beehive Books or at beehivebooks.com. You can find me personally on Instagram at I am a hotel is my Instagram handle for non-Beehive work like this. And yeah, that's about it.
Oh yeah, and Josh and I have this really awesome fantasy adventure graphic novel that we're trying to find a publisher for. So any high-powered publishing people out there who can afford, to offer a righteous advance,
For all the executives listening right now.
Yeah,
that's right.
You're first.
It's really awesome. Yeah,
it's really good.
Right. All of them listening, hey, pick up the book. Quit playing around. I'm glad we can put it out there. Thank you guys for coming by. This, like I said, this is a great book. Josh, you do great work. Gideon, your artwork was incredible for this book.
Thank you.
Everything came together real well. We look forward to having you guys back when we get this next book made for everyone listening. But yeah, no, thanks for coming on. Everyone listening, we hope you enjoyed the show. Follow them, get the book. Again, you won't be disappointed. And everyone listening, have a good night.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Ryan.
Take
Bye.
care, Ryan.